Hello, my name is Televar, and I am a time traveler from the distant future. I have traveled way back here in time from what is a far distant future, thousands and thousands of years from now in the future. I've traveled back here in time because the human race right now is at a kind of bottleneck. You have a lot of big problems and issues, and if you don't solve them, then I'm not going to be able to be born and have the life that I want to have in the future. So I have traveled back here in time to take the human race through a paradigm shift to solve many of the big problems that you're facing and move you from what is really sort of an accepted underlying reality that the human race has right now into a new higher state of reality where you are within a system that has solutions for your problems. Right now, the Democrats and Republicans here in America are just at each other's throats. Climate change is this very serious issue, which one party says the human race is going to collapse within a matter of years if you don't deal with climate change. The other party says it's not even real. It's not even a real thing. Men and women are struggling right now. They are not having children, not getting married. If they do get married, there are huge economic issues, both at the human level where people can't afford housing, and nations are burdened down with so much debt that they're having to spend huge amounts of money just paying the debt. You need a whole new economic system. What I'm here to do is to try to move you just into a whole new reality that has solutions for all these and many of the other problems between blacks and whites, heterosexuals and homosexuals, just across the board. Everything is at a sort of a place right now where either you need to move into a new higher state of existence or you're just not going to make it. So the term paradigm shift was coined by the author Thomas Kuhn in his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions in 1962. And what he sort of said, he said basically each branch of science or even each academic branch will have an accepted paradigm. And that paradigm you can think of as sort of like a box. And it says that all the reality for that scientific or academic branch, everything exists within that given box. The solutions are within the box, the structure, the laws and rules that the system is following is all within this structured paradigm. But then he said that sometimes a paradigm will begin to break down, like when Charles Darwin in the field of anthropology wrote the book The Origin of Species. It just shattered the older paradigm. And then the scientific community or academic community will spend time, they'll see a new model or see problems building up in the old model, and they'll be looking for a new model. But that there will be this sudden shift from an old paradigm into a new paradigm. And what I'm saying is that the entire human race has a shared paradigm that is what you would call your underlying reality. It may be a little bit different in each different nation, but now that you're all connected together through the internet and have much more connection and travel and communication and business work and everything like that between all different nations, there's basically an accepted underlying reality. And I'm saying that this underlying reality is not a high enough reality for you to move forward. In Plato's book, The Republic, he talked about an idea of humanity living in a cave that has a fire going and it throws shadows on the wall. And the people in the cave think the shadows on the wall is the whole reality of their world, but that actually outside the cave, there's just a whole nother different reality. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this video series, is beginning to the only way to do it is to sort of go baby steps, to explain something in one scientific field, then in another scientific field, then an economic field, culturally, just to go sort of piece by piece, basically breaking down the old reality and putting in place pieces of a new and higher reality. But it's going to be very hard work for you, the viewer, because part of the problem that Thomas Kuhn talked about in his book is, so you have this box, and people can say, oh, out-of-the-box thinking is great. That's real creativity, is out-of-the-box thinking. But in actuality, in any serious sense, people think that everything is in an accepted model that everybody agrees upon. And when you come up with something that is not within that box, it's just pie in the sky foolishness. I'm going to give you an example here of what this video series will be like. Okay, so first I'm going to give you an example that I believe is scientific, would be accepted as scientific fact here in your world at this time for the human race. And then I'm going to describe something for the whole broader human race in your outer reality, and I'm going to line it up with this thing that I explain, this first thing that I'm going to explain. And you'll see how it can line up point for point with the whole outer reality and this one little scientific piece of information I'm going to give you. And yet you'll say, well, to think that this is the true reality for the whole human race is crazy, because it's outside the box. So this is just an example of the sort of work we're going to do in this video series, but it'll just take example after example after example to begin to, it's like putting bricks in place to build a new house that the human race, it's like right now you're living in a small shack, and the small shack is not holding up to the weather and the storms, and it's breaking apart. And so I'm going to put these new bricks of information down to build a new, bigger, stronger, better house of the mind, house of the spirit, house of a new higher state of reality for the human race to live within. And within this new reality, as we begin to develop it, the human race will see your place within nature. You'll know, think of two high school kids right now. There's two high school kids. They're both about middle of their senior year in high school. One of them has known since he was a kid that he wants to be a brain surgeon. And so he's in high school now, and for him, he has this very detailed path going forward. First, he's got to get really good grades here his senior year so he can get into a good medical school, or a good college or university to go pre-med. Then while he's doing pre-med, he has to work really hard so he can get into a good medical school. Then he's going to have to work really hard in medical school to get a good residency with a good hospital or something like that, and on to finally becoming a brain surgeon. So it's sort of like his life. He has a set of train tracks going out ahead of him, and he knows where he's going and what he wants to do with his life. Now think of the second kid who just doesn't know what he wants to do, and he doesn't think much about it. So he just sort of gets up and says, "What's going on today?" Well, I got to go to school, and, and he just sort of takes it a day at a time, and he has no idea where his life is going. He has no plans. He's not. Can you see how different these two high school students' lives are? Well, right now, the entire human race, you are at a stage where you have no idea where you're going with your future. In fact, you can think of all the different nations as sort of like different organs in a body system or different brain systems within a brain that have not yet unified together even into one unified system. You have independent national leaders. You don't have a world leader. You don't have a unified system functioning together as one whole unit to move you forward. So this is a big problem. How is the human race supposed to go forward when you're, like that second high school kid? You just don't, you're just not on any kind of track for going anywhere. So as I begin to explain through this video series, this new concept of a higher reality, the human race will begin to see how you fit into nature and into existence, and it will begin to set up a pathway for you to go forward. But so let me give you this example I was just talking about. Okay, so a human embryo, inside you have a woman and she's become pregnant. And she's very early on in the pregnancy. She's at about the 6 to 8 week mark of development for the little embryo. Right at this stage, the embryo either goes through a biological default process where it becomes female, or it has to go through an aggressive masculinization, which turns it into a boy. So it's either born as a girl going through the biological default process, or it's born as a boy. And so now let me compare that to the reality situation and a higher reality construct for the human race, okay? When this happens to the little embryo, it has about 7 or 8 billion glial cells in the brain, and the glial cells are the cells that sort of construct, they maintain, they care for the neurons. And glial cells can get cancer, neurons cannot get cancer. There are about the same number at this time of neurons, about 7 or 8 billion neurons. The neurons right at this point are all connecting together into the neural network for this little embryo. The whole little embryo is only about the size of a cashew nut. So this is just one end of that little cashew nut. All this is happening. And what happens is it's the mother's electrical energy. The electrical energy is made up of electrons, which each electron has a -1 charge. So it's negatively charged. And so it's as the embryo's brain is electrifying, this connects in with the mother's electricity, the mother's negative electricity, and her electricity will come down. And this is what causes the biological default of the embryo. And this is where it needs to go through this aggressive masculinization. Well, okay, so let me switch now to the human race. We have about 8 billion human beings. Human beings get cancer, and glial cells can get cancer. We have about 8 billion computers. That you could talk about phones and pads and TVs and all. There's a whole lot of stuff going on. But let's just say for a moment there's around 8 billion, and all of these computers are linking together, have been linked together, creating our human internet. So that is a parallel that exactly matches up with the embryo. So it's easy to, when you know that the embryo, the mother's energies, negative electric energies, come down into the little embryo, and begin this biological default process. And here in America especially, but around the world also, as the whole global internet has been forming, and we've been getting more and more of this electrical energy and building this whole electrical reality of all the screens that we all spend so much time looking at. This new electrical reality has been bringing about this massive feminization of the world. It's like there are two existing realities. Now, there's the particle reality, the old reality before we had computers. And at first there were a few TVs, and we started to sort of have a little bit of this imaginary or this somewhat connected. The rules of the electric reality are sort of different. You can have one source broadcasting a news broadcast or something, and millions of people can see it. So it connects more in this different way than the particle reality, which is much more localized. But then with the advent of the internet, we are going through, you can see in the outer world, we're going through a biological default process. All this DEI and woke stuff, this has been a biological default process that an embryo goes through right at the 6 to 8 week mark. And I think the election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump was sort of a decision-making point. It was a place where humanity had to make a decision. But if we have a greater Y chromosome, we have to become male, or the whole embryo will miscarry. For the little human embryo, if it has a Y chromosome and it does not masculinize, it simply dies. So, but there's another problem is, let's say that when Donald Trump and the Republicans, think for a moment of the Republican Party as being sort of like the paternal set of chromosomes, and the Democratic Party as being sort of like the maternal set of chromosomes. If you're a woman and you had a little embryo inside of you, if the paternal chromosomes won and they began to turn the embryo male, would you want to carry that embryo if the male, the paternal set of chromosomes, just began doing everything it could to basically completely destroy the maternal set of chromosomes? No. I mean, this is a critical thing for the human race right now. This is part of the great stress that everything is under at the moment, is a male embryo has to get its mother to be willing to invest the huge amounts of energy to give life to that embryo, and then to give birth to it, and then to carry and nurture and raise the little embryo. You know, if you think about it, the legend of the Holy Grail, there's two very specific aspects of the legend of the Holy Grail: that it will be something that'll give long life, and that it'll be something that will nurture you with food. And a mother who is giving birth to a child, she does so in her cup, in her embryo. She gives birth to the child, and she nurtures it with food all the way along and gives it long life. So our greater mother would be the Holy Grail in this picture, which I have yet to prove out. It's going to take a long time and a lot of information to go into much more depth on many things to get you to begin to put these two realities together, and not just say that's outside the box, that's crazy, we can't accept that. There's a lot of work to do. And the new reality that I'm going to explain is much more multidimensional, so it's going to be much more complex than just a simple answer like this. But think about this. The legend of King Arthur was the time when this was back around the 10th, 11th, 12th centuries, the early Middle Ages was the time when there were all these legends of King Arthur. And during that time, the whole of Europe got this Holy Grail fever. that people started writing these books about the Holy Grail, and everybody was going on Grail quests and talking and thinking and searching for the Holy Grail. Well, if we are at the 6 to 8 week mark of our development as a greater embryo right now, just again, lots of work to do, but if we are at that stage now, well, the umbilical cord, the mother's umbilical cord connects with the little embryo at about the 5-week mark of development. This would have been in a kind of greater time construct that we're also going to have to talk about. This would have been around the time that the world got Holy Grail fever. So we suddenly, all of Europe and mostly the advanced world gets this Holy Grail fever. They're thinking, searching, looking, wondering about this idea. Our greater mother's umbilical cord connects to the human race, begins massively feeding us, and we launch through the Middle Ages into the Industrial Revolution, into our modern technological development, just exploding through one stage of growth after another. So some of the things I'm going to talk about in the next lecture, I think your scientists back here in my distant past do not yet have a correct understanding of the structure of existence, of nature itself. So it's sort of like if you were looking at the problems the human race is facing and you were thinking of Earth as the center of the solar system, and then you look out at all the big problems like the planets, their orbits, all their orbits seem to be off. By getting a correct understanding of the structure of nature, going from the geocentric model to the heliocentric model, all of a sudden all the orbits fell into place. Well, we need to move beyond that concept. That went from describing the solar system to then beginning to see that we were part of a galaxy and there are multiple galaxies making up the universe. But that still hasn't gone far enough in understanding the true structure of existence and of nature. And if we get a better understanding of that, then we're going to have a lot of other pieces fall into place. So that's something we're going to begin to work on. I call it infinite existence and multidimensionalism. Next, I'm going to begin to get into the theory of everything. And we're going to overturn the standard model of particle physics for this new model of infinite existence and multidimensionalism. We'll lay the background first, then we'll start to get into the physics some. We're not going to do any mathematics or anything. It's all going to be basic common sense. I'm going to explain some common sense ideas that regular people can understand, but that is deep enough for the physicist to think about and begin doing all the advanced mathematics on. Then another thing we're going to get into in this video series is you go back as far as we can go back in time for the entire human race. We have had one logical system that the human race has used for our development. This has been, of course, mathematics, the mathematical logical system. And I'm going to introduce an entirely new logical system that's going to just change reality completely. It's a lot of my ideas, where they come from is this new understanding from this new logical system. When Sir Isaac Newton introduced calculus back in the 1600s, this was a new branch on the tree of mathematics, and that's what really they could use calculus then to begin doing the kinds of equations to figure out how to build locomotives and large factory machinery, and it's what introduced the Industrial Revolution. And so I'm going to not bring just another branch on the tree of mathematics, but an entirely new this one is a bright colored logical system that is entirely separate from mathematics. And it's also a universal logical system. It's something they could, figure out on the other side of the universe. It's just like mathematics. Another thing we need to do is to get into a new economic system. Think of the economic system here on Earth right now as being like a seed economic system. Picture you have an acorn, and inside that acorn all winter long, there's life inside that seed. And picture that it's doing all kinds of economic stuff, but it's following a seed economic system. And then as the snow melts in the spring, the seed cracks open, and all of a sudden this acorn realizes that it is in a whole entirely new reality structure. And it's looking up at these huge, great oak trees, millions, billions of times larger than the tiny acorn. And it realizes it has to jump into life. It has to throw down roots and throw up branches and start getting leaves out there to pull in energy and the roots to pull in nutrients and water. And it has to start massively growing beyond what it was while it was in the seed stage. All of life does this. The sperm and the egg come together, and those two eggs form into one, two cells form into one cell and grow into a human being with trillions and trillions of cells. So we need to go over that. And another important thing that we're going to do here in this series is we're going to look at what is going on with men and women. When the little embryo is at this point where it is going through this biological default, imagine that it has bantam, an inner civilization of inner men and women. So what has to happen is if the men, the paternal chromosomes, but thus on the side of the men, become the dominant factor in building a greater male being, the men have to form a new relationship with the women. And when you form this new greater relationship here for your world and for the human race, forming a new greater relationship between all the men. It'll break down country by country and stuff like that some too, but it'll also have aspects of a greater relationship between all the human men and all the human women. That will re-energize individual human energies between men and women. Then all the individual men and women will also begin having children again and having a whole new, much more complex, multi-dimensional, much more interesting set of relationship factors. So one other thing that we're going to get into that's related to this, picture that you have a group of human beings and your governments, most of the governments around the world, not all of them, but most of the democracies, like here in America, they divide those human beings into two parts, but it's not into men and women. They divide them into conservatives and progressives, these two political halves. That's a governmental division, but this new relationship is a different kind of separation between this group of humanity. So if you have a group and you're separating it into a right-left division, you're creating a minus sign, and this is the negative energies of the relationship between the two political parties. But then if you create a new relationship between men and women, it's a vertical relationship. Men push up into women, women sort of surround and are sort of above the men, pushing down like gravity on the men. And so this creates a plus sign and a whole new relationship. But we're going to relate this to the concept of proton and atomic dynamics and neutron. So we're going to talk about life and the genetic or biological aspect of things, but we're also going to start to look at making comparisons and analogies between humanity and atomic dynamics. And that's going to give us a lot of new ideas about structural components that can allow us to understand sort of universal laws and the ways to grow correctly. So that's going to be a whole nother multi-dimensional medium of structure for the human race to use to, as we understand this structure, again, knowing how to advance through into the future. So there's lots to get to in this video series. And if I do a good job back here in my far, far, far distant past of getting the human race past all these problems where you are stuck and really struggling right now, and if we get past that and things leap into, through sort of a genesis leap into a whole much richer, higher, greater paradigm full of new growth energies for the human race, if that happens, then I'll get to be born and have an exciting life with a very healthy, growing, developing human race far in the distant future. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.